Hello and welcome to another of my virtual Jericho. It's Wednesday afternoon at 5:30. This week we've got a rather special guest. We've got the new editor of the Oxford Mail and the Oxford Times. He's been in post for about 3 months, but he's Pete Gavan. He's already got his feet under the table, so he should be in a position to tell you what his vision is and so on for the paper. Just to preview what's coming up next week, we've got Helen Salisbury, who's a local GP hero who's vaccinated 1,000 people over a weekend, I think, a couple of weekends ago in the Jericho Health Centre. The week after that, Professor Gary Browning on Bob Dylan at 80. So plenty of good things coming up. But meanwhile, back to today. Pete took over in November and he runs the Oxford Mail and the Oxford Times from Wiltshire. Pete, what's your vision and who are you?
Well, I'll take those in reverse order. I've been a journalist for 20 plus years. I started off at my hometown weekly that was in Cirencester, so not a million miles away, and then worked around a handful of dailies, spent 11 years on the south coast in Portsmouth on the news there in various positions around the newsroom and the news desk. Then I got the editorship of the Swindon Advertiser at the start of 2018, which takes in the Wiltshire weeklies, and then I took over Oxford in addition to the Wiltshire titles, as you say, at the start of November. So that's my journalistic background. You know, that includes pretty much doing every job in the newsroom, from my first job as a trainee reporter to being the editor now, and now group role. In terms of my vision, I mean, I think it's what anybody would want for their local newspaper. You know, we should be the voice of our readers, the voice of Oxford Mail readers, Oxford Times readers, the various weeklies around. We should be telling their stories, representing them, you know, through good and bad. We should be holding power, as you'd expect, whether that's the council or the police or the health trusts, etc. But I think maybe more importantly than ever at the moment, we need to be, you know, the place to go. You know, we've all seen in the last year, well, coming up on a year since the pandemic outbreak, you know, there's been a huge thirst for news and a huge thirst for people coming to us to find out what's happening, you know, across the various episodes that have made up the pandemic so far. And in tandem with that, everybody will be aware that there's lots of things that go around on Facebook and that are shared around that are, you know, for want of a better phrase, that are fake news. And so it's more important than ever that we are that trusted place that people can go to find out what's happening. And that's been borne out, I think, over the past 12 months because, you know, dramatic rises in our audience, particularly on the days when major announcements are made that we've had in the last few weeks, the various things around the tiers in Oxford and lockdowns and so on. So that's the broad vision, really. But I think that the biggest key at the moment is making us that sort of indispensable, trusted news that the community knows that we're there for them.
Now, you say big audiences. Now, I've actually looked at your ABC figures, and the Oxford Times sells 12,618, 38 a week, and the Oxford Mail 7,468. That's hardly covers the city, does it?
No, but we've got vast digital audiences. We're touching, you know, over 5 million on a good month. So we're getting collectively a bigger audience than we've ever had before.
But are you disappointed with the hard copy, the newsagent sales, or the sale of the papers?
I think, you know, everyone's got to be realistic about newspapers. You know, the newspaper sales, hard copy newspaper sales have been in decline for many years. You know, for at least the last 15 years of my career. I know that it's been challenging, and I think part of that is about the growth of the internet. Part of that is about the demographic of people who traditionally buy newspapers, which sort of skews to the older demographic. I mean, and that's not to say that no younger people buy newspapers, but I think if we're talking in broad brush terms, you've got there's the younger generations who are much more inclined maybe to get their news from the Mail's website and follow us on Facebook and Twitter and so on. And so,
have you cracked the internet, do you think, as a paper? Has the Times and the Mail cracked the internet?
No, I don't think so by any means. I think we continue to grow and we continue to develop. Each year we are reaching more and more people. So I think there's huge opportunities to continue to grow. I can bring my experience from Swindon because that goes over a longer period of time. But we've grown each year over the past 3 years, and I know that's been mirrored in the Mail. So there's a huge audience, and you can continue to develop that through the right making the right content, making sure we're putting our resource into producing the right sort of material that our readers want to read.
Do you tell your journalists digital first? Is that your mantra?
Well, I mean, it's a balance, to be honest, in terms of the when things are delivered. I think we are a digital first operation in the sense that that will be very often the first place that people will read things. And if there are stories breaking in and around the city, that's when they're going to go. That's where they're going to go first. So we have to be a digitally focused newsroom because we have to continue to grow our digital audience, and so that's a key part of the strategy going forward in this year and others. By the same token, we manage our news lists as newspapers always have done, and so if there are stories, for example, that no one else has got, then we will use them on the same day as they go in the paper. So we'd say that the exclusive content goes to the reader at the same time, whether they're a digital reader or whether they're a hard copy paper reader.
About 15 years ago, I had a conversation with the editor of the Oldham Advertiser at the Society of Editors, who was telling me on the internet. He said, "Oh, the internet." He said, we bung all our stories there, but we keep our good stories for the paper. The Oldham Advertiser is now dead. Does that tell you anything?
Sorry, I didn't catch all of that.
The editor of the Oldham Advertiser told me that they put stuff on the internet, but they keep the good stories for the paper. And the paper's now dead. Does that tell you something about local papers and the internet?
I mean, I don't think local newspapers are dead in that way at all. I think the newspapers that we produce are vital and are important for large parts of the community, and we attach the same amount of importance to producing the newspapers as we do to the stories that we do for online.
But you've only got a partial paywall, haven't you? What was the thinking behind that? Why haven't you gone all the way?
The idea behind it really is, rather than having a hard paywall where people get to a point like you might have on the Times, for example, where you can get a couple of articles a week for free. What we're actually trying to do is encourage people to support local newspapers, to support us, to help us have a sustainable future. A lot of this was launched during the early part of the pandemic, when everybody was the first time round, so people weren't getting out to buy their papers, and so it was about, and it remains being about, helping to give journalism a sustainable future. So rather than waiting for people to hit the benchmark number of articles before deciding whether or not they want to take out a subscription, what we are hoping to do is speak directly to the readers and encourage them to subscribe, because they want to subscribe and they want to play their part in helping us continue to grow and develop.
How is the partial paywall working? Is it driving people to subscribe?
Yeah, I mean, we've had good success with subscriptions since we've kicked it off. We've got a 2 months for £2 offer at the moment as well. So there's I know it's the old cliche, but it's the sort of less than the price of a cup of coffee kind of thing, and for that you get obviously unlimited access. You get an ad-light version of the site. If you're scrolling through on your phone, for example, you might see fewer adverts. So yeah, it has been successful, and it's something that we're continuing to focus on in this year.
Let me put a position to you that the local newspapers never understood the internet and came to it too little and too late.
Well, I mean that's a view. I mean, this dates back, the internet and how to tackle it dates back a very long way. I can remember it's at the Gloucestershire Echo in Cheltenham. The internet was two people who worked in the basement and had no interaction with the newsroom at all. And then, little by little, over those following years, the late 2000s, and then obviously into the 2010s, gradually it became more and more of a focus and more and more front and center in the newsroom. So I think it was always going to be a very difficult decision for people to jump, which I think is probably why people didn't make radical decisions 15 or 20 years ago, because there was a process that happened then as the internet continued to grow and various revenue generating streams began to go to the internet. The homes were sold on online, and cars, etc., things that were traditionally newspaper things. So I think we've had to adapt and continue to adapt over this past 15 years, and I think not everybody's got it right and not everybody's got it wrong, but we are where we are.
Now Facebook and Google and indeed Craigslist and Rightmove have stolen your lunch, haven't they, in terms of advertising?
Well, as I say, things there has been a huge growth. Everyone knows that huge growth in property and that kind of thing online, which has had an impact. But yeah, I mean, the classifieds similarly, that there'll be a migration there onto the online. Facebook, that's a major driver of digital traffic for us. So that's an important part of helping us grow our digital audience by using our Facebook following, using Facebook to get our articles out to a large audience.
So I mean, they've stolen your lunch, but they give you some crumbs off the table. So you're quite happy to not take them on. Is that characterization wrong?
Take them on over
to attack them, because I mean, what percentage of advertising now goes to Google? It's something like 80%. There's a ridiculous amount of advertising goes to Google and Facebook.
Yes, well, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So, all right, let's look at last week's Oxford Times if we can. I bought it. I buy it every week for £1.40. Though I moan about it, it had 79 pages. Your editorial was 33 pages of that. 17 was news, 8 was culture, 4 was sport, 2 was letters, and 2 was travel. So that was all that you generated. Is that enough?
Yeah, I think it's a good offer. It's a good offer for the reader, and it's a good mix of content for sure.
Could you make it any better?
We've got a very hard-working team of journalists.
But you had 15 pages from the Press Association in there, and one of the questions was, what's that doing in the Oxford Times?
Well, we provide a mix of content to the readers, and I guess you're referring to the food and drink guide that we run each week, and possibly a homes guide that we sometimes run.
Oh, it was a garden, so, yes.
Yeah, so I think it's important with any newspaper to give people a mix of content, and these are high quality. They're not actually PA; they're produced by they're Newsquest produced supplements, and I think they're excellent quality and well worth their place.
And are they essentially produced by Newsquest, so they appear in all Newsquest papers in the UK?
Well, it's up to individual editors.
But I mean that's 24 pages out of 77. Seems quite a lot. I mean, what feedback do you get on how popular those features are?
Oh, I've had no negative feedback from anybody saying that they're not happy with it. So people always change their minds if they're not happy, and so I certainly haven't had any negative feedback.
No, you're advertising. You only had 12 pages in total, 6 classified, 2 paid for by the government. The government's actually kept the local papers going through the pandemic, haven't they? They've spent millions on full-page ads. Are you grateful to them for that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's a terrible situation that we find ourselves in with the pandemic. But of course, they've taken out adverts in the titles that have generated revenue.
But generate a lot of revenue, really. I mean, each and every week. Does that constrain your journalism, do you think, at all?
No, I don't.
No? Let's talk about Oxford, if we can. Oxford is the centre of the world as far as COVID is concerned, in terms of vaccines, in terms of everything. Do you think you've reflected that in the papers?
Yeah, I think we've had really strong coverage across throughout the pandemic, to be perfectly honest, and especially in these last few months while Oxford became more and more of a focus around the vaccine. Absolutely, we've had a brilliant health reporter who's done a great job in getting these stories out there and telling what can often be complicated and difficult stories in a straightforward way for the reader to sort of clearly understand.
So, do you think you've celebrated Oxford science enough?
Yeah, I think we've shone a spotlight very much so on the key part that Oxford and the people of Oxford have played in getting us to where we are.
Okay, I mean, so what do you want to change in the papers? What's your manifesto for the Times and the Mail?
Well, a bit like what I said at the start. I think it's very important for a local newspaper to, and by saying that includes any of the titles that I mentioned earlier. We need to tell people the things that impact their lives in and around the city, so that we are going to tell them things that the council are doing, for example, or decisions that are being made. We're going to tell them about what's happening in the courts. We're going to tell them about what's happening on the roads, and all of those things that are the kind of things people come to us for every day. But then we're also going to tell them, I think it's really important that we do our part to shine a light on the people across the city and the wider area who go above and beyond, people who are doing great things, people who are doing positive things, and not just during this sort of pandemic time when there are people in lots of places going the extra mile in their communities. But I think it's it's key to find, for me, it's key to find a balance between the hard edge news, which certainly we know attracts large audiences digitally and has traditionally been the kind of thing that might make the front pages, but also the human side as well. So for my money, it's about bringing a balance of human interest and telling the stories of people alongside the kind of pillars that we and all local newspapers do.
How big is your newsroom? How many journalists do you have, and how many would you like to have?
We've got 10 reporters, and that covers, we've got a great team there who work very hard to bring brilliant stories from across the patch. And we've got, someone focusing on health, somebody focusing on the courts, somebody focusing on local democracy. So, yeah, I think we've got a great team there.
But your local democracy report is paid for by the BBC, correct?
Yeah, that's a scheme funded by the BBC, yeah. But
should the BBC be doing that?
Well, I think it's been a really successful scheme, and it's helped hold councils and authorities to greater across the country. You know, there's 100+ LDRs around the country, all of whom are hosted by individual titles, and then they provide their content to a wider group. So I think it's been a really successful scheme.
So this is David Lynch, isn't it? So he's paid a salary by the BBC out of the license fee. What does NewsQuest do apart from print him?
Sorry, he's hosted by us. Sorry.
He's hosted by you, but his salary is paid by the BBC. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's a BBC funded scheme. Yeah.
But he produces loads of stories for you every week, doesn't he? I mean, 3 or 4 every week I see from him. So he comes to you for free, and he keeps on giving.
But the way that the LDR scheme works is that the other people who are part of the scheme have access to all the content provided by the LDRs.
So what would you do if you didn't have him or her?
Well, we covered local councils and local politics before the LDR scheme, and were it not to exist, then we'd cover it afterwards.
There's a thing around the democratic deficit that courts are not reported as much as they should be, local government not reported. What's your position on that?
I disagree with that entirely. I think we've got brilliant local democracy coverage. We had it before the LDR scheme, and we've certainly got it now with an LDR who can focus their time on it. And similarly with court reporting, we do excellent in-depth court reporting, just as we always have done. So I don't think that's something I'd agree with at all.
So do you put a reporter into court every day?
We make a decision as to what's on at court.
But it used to be that local papers were there to hold people up to ridicule who appeared in court. Are they still doing that, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, what we do is look at what's on at Magistrates Court, look at what's on at Crown Court, make a decision about what the best things are that we want to cover, and then we go and cover them, which I think is pretty much what I've always done.
You don't feel there could be a bit more court coverage than you give?
No, I don't think so. As I say, I think we apply the same critical eye as to what used to happen when I was the reporter going to court, and my news editor would be telling me what to do. I think maybe a long time ago there was enough resource for somebody to go and sit in court all day and without knowing what's coming up. So we've got better access, I guess, now to the lists and to what's going on, so we can make a more educated decision about where to send people. But no, I think our court coverage is excellent.
But the lawyers and the judges say you're not doing enough. If you listen to them, they're saying local papers should be there more often. Yeah,
but they may well be saying that, but certainly not in the areas that I'm responsible for. We've got a brilliant court coverage in Swindon, and have done these last couple of years, and the same in Oxford.
What are you proudest of the stories you've done? First of all, in Swindon and in Oxford, which have made you most proud?
I mean, well, I think it's very difficult, really, because I think most recently on the it's been about the speaking around the vaccine and speaking to the people behind that, and also some fairly heartbreaking pleas from a nurse that we had recently about people encouraging people to follow the rules, and things that really are impacting people's lives. And so, that's the most important stuff, and there are many other examples over the past few months around the COVID coverage, and similarly in Swindon. I mean, obviously over 3 years there's been lots and lots of brilliant stories, but I think the reporters have really come into their own in getting to grips with how we tell the stories of the pandemic, from the initial stories that were all around, what it is and what's happening, to now where there are all the stories around how we're getting out of it and how people are following the rules, and it's an endless story. But I think those really are the things that have probably made the most difference.
Now, the telly has cashed in, has made waves by sending people into intensive care units for days on end. If you don't know if you've seen any of Clive Murray's stuff this week, do you wish you had the time and the resources to put one of your reporters into an intensive care unit for more than a while?
I would think it would be an absolutely amazing thing to do, but I think that there's been incredibly limited access, which I think is borne out by the fact we've only seen that on our TV screens on extremely rare occasions. So I think it's very, very difficult to get that sort of access. But obviously, if it was possible, then it would be extraordinary. But I think it's very challenging to.
So you're breaking up a little bit. Have you tried with the JR and is it the Princess Margaret Swindon to get into the intensive care units?
It's not a question that I know that we've asked directly. No.
Yeah. Investigative journalism, is it dead in local papers, do you think?
No, I don't think so. We are. Investigations are something that we discuss often. We talk about FOIs. We talk about ideas about how people can look into things in a bit greater depth. So no, I think it's ongoing.
But do you have the resources to free somebody up if they've got a great story out and they want to pursue?
Well, I mean, we discuss all stories on their merits, and so if there was something that warranted the time and required the time, then I think I'd probably be pleased to give any of the reporters the time to look into that.
So if I was an Oxford Times hack and I had a great story and I said, look, I need 2 weeks off the rota to do this, would you let me do that?
I think that's probably unlikely, to be perfectly honest.
So it's a resources question, is it, as much as anything?
Well, it's just about balance. We're not. That's what I mean about looking at the stories on their merits and looking at the outcomes that we'd be likely to get. I suppose even in that instance that there may be a circumstance in which that was the right thing to do. It's not something in my experience of news desks for over the last sort of 10 years or so that's been a question that's been asked. We've had lots of investigations that run over periods of time to get to the point of fruition. But what tends to happen is that it might have been 2 weeks of work, for example, or more to get to the point of fruition.
And end up with nothing. And end up with nothing.
No, that wasn't what I was going to say.
No.
So, but that's people working on those investigations alongside other articles, rather than say a 2 week chunk at a time. But really, the answer really is it would depend, and it's really impossible. It's impossible to say on a hypothetical.
I judge the local journalism awards for the Society of Editors and also for the Press Gazette, and I'm always sort of surprised at how little curiosity there is. Really, how much I don't get the feeling that, God, this surprises me. I mean, do you pick up your paper and think, God, I didn't know that? Or not?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've got a great team of reporters who bring us brilliant stories, and that's borne out by the large number of digital readers that we have. So yeah, I think we get it right. Get lots of good stories.
And again, back to your manifesto. Is it part of your manifesto that you cause a few more ripples? Any campaigns planned in Oxford, for example?
I mean, I think it's important for a local newspaper to be strident, to have an opinion, to lead the debate where possible, rather than following it. So yeah, I'm all for the Mail being a campaigning title. We haven't got a campaign going at the moment, but that's absolutely not to say that that we won't be kicking one off. We've had a number over the past couple of years in Swindon, and I think you can make a difference, and it also shows the community that you serve that you care about them.
I mean, you're having a campaign at the moment about local businesses, aren't you? About supporting local businesses. Am I right?
Yeah, we have. Yeah, I mean, prior to my taking on, we ran a number of campaigns, the Mail and all titles, around supporting local business, and yeah, some of that actually continued after I took on the titles in November. So post lockdown, in June, there was a campaign to encourage people to shop locally and support their local businesses, and similarly through November and in the run-up to Christmas, and I mean there was the lockdown itself. The November lockdown came along, but that was encouraging people to use the businesses in any way they could, whether that was through their online services or whatever, and look to use them in that post-lockdown period between Christmas and November and Christmas, which was a bit shaky around the restrictions. But I think we've played a good part in showing that we've got a strong relationship with businesses around the city, and making sure, or encouraging the readers to use those businesses and help them, because obviously they've been, to varying degrees, and depending on the business, they would have all been hit over the past year with fallout from COVID.
Now, let's dream, assuming the pandemic tapers off to an end. What campaigns would you like to run in Oxford in the next year or so?
Well, to be honest, it's sort of, where any decisions around campaigns are led around an issue coming to the fore that we feel like we might want to take on. So again, it's very hard to speak hypothetically. There are obviously big issues around the city, around planning and around Greenbelt and housing and motorists and driving, and the excuse me, and the zero emissions. There are big stories about that down the line and in time might lend themselves to campaigning, but it's very difficult to say because it's led by events or a new thing happening that allows us to pin a campaign on something, and so it could be anything, to be honest. But the bigger issues like that tend to be the kind of things where you want to shout and try and make a difference.
I mean, one of the big issues in Oxford at the moment is LTNs, as you know. The county council wanted to create LTNs. Do you think that's suitable for you to be campaigning about?
That's
low traffic neighbourhoods, actually.
Yeah,
low traffic neighbourhoods, actually.
Yeah. I mean, that depends on where the low traffic neighbourhood is and what's happening in the local area, and all those factors come into play before we'd make a call on whether it was something that we were going to campaign on.
I mean, I, as you know, live in Jericho, which has had an interesting series of campaigns on low traffic neighbourhoods. And the county council is going to consult on that next week. Do you think your readers are fully aware of all of the factors playing in Jericho, or not?
Well, I mean, I know from my from the team that this is an ongoing story that we've reported. So yeah, I'm sure the readers know that what's happened and where we are with it, and obviously we'll keep them up to date as and when things develop. Now,
NewsQuest, which is you're the group editor for Swindon. Are you Swindon, Oxford? Do you go as far as Reading, or just two towns?
Yeah, Wiltshire and Oxfordshire.
Right. I mean, NewsQuest is actually an American corporation, isn't it? It's Gannett, which used to make huge amounts of money, but no longer does. It used to make 40% profit. It doesn't. I mean, last year they made 88% less last year. Is that the future for local newspapers, the big American corporations?
I'm not sure
My question was, what's Gannett got to do with the Oxford Mail? Should it be locally owned and locally controlled?
Well, we are the Gannett is the parent company to NewsQuest, and NewsQuest owns and runs all the titles around the country, including the Mail.
And it's the biggest owner of local newspapers in the country, I think. Is it, or second biggest?
Yeah, second, I think. Reach PLC might have the most. I'm not 100% sure of the exact numbers.
But it's but staff numbers are coming down in NewsQuest, aren't they? They're falling 12% or so a year, which is usually journalists who are going. Is that wise? Sorry,
you just broke up for a moment there.
Staff numbers are going down. NewsQuest cuts journalists. Is that wise?
Well, in common with all newspaper groups, decisions always have to be made, and so that difficult decisions have had to be made over recent years around the resource that we have, for sure.
What happened to Christopher Gray, by the way? I used to rather enjoy his ego column. Has he left the Oxford Mail? Did you hear that?
I don't know. Sorry, I don't know.
You don't know, because he always had a full page in the Oxford Mail, full of when I met so and so, when I met so and so. Just wonder what's happened to him. Has he left the staff?
I don't know.
I think we may have a little surprise for you. One of Britain's more famous journalists, Raymond Snoddy, media editor of the Times in his time, and presenter of Bad News, started his career on the Oxford Mail in 1966 to 69. Now he's been actually looking at your paper today. Ray, are you there? Could you tell us what you thought of the paper today?
He's not here yet.
Oh, he's not there yet. Okay. Well, he will be here. He's too busy. I just asked him to look at the website today, because you've actually had some rather famous people go through the Oxford Mail, haven't you, in the time? Is that right, Pete? You've had not just Ray, but David Bell, lots and lots of big names have passed through the Oxford Mail on the way.
Yeah, I'm sure it's got a great heritage of reports through the years.
Do you see the current bunch as being on the way up, or how do you motivate them? You're like a Premier League manager. How do you motivate your journalists to give of their best?
Well, as I've said, there's a really good, hard-working team who they work very hard to bring the best stories that we can from in and around the city. Obviously now we've got many more analytical tools at our disposal than we had when it's just in the pre-internet, that allowed us, and indeed all the reporters, to see very clearly the things that are doing well, and that helps us and guide our decisions around making sure that they're spending their time on the things that are of most value to us in terms of helping us grow our digital audience. So, yeah.
So do you do byline counts, and do you do digital hit counts on stories?
Yeah, we the analytics allow us to see how many people are reading each story. Whether that's in real time or at the end of the day when we can look back at yesterday, for example, and see the count.
I don't know if Phil, have you got it up? I don't know. Can we see the Oxford Mail today, Phil? Perhaps. Oh, in fact, here's Raymond Snoddy. Raymond Snoddy.
Hello, how you doing?
Greetings. The man who started his journalism career on the Oxford Mail.
Not quite. The Middlesex Advertiser before the Oxford Mail, and on the Middlesex Advertiser I worked with one Gregory Dyke, Esquire, but he escaped to fame and fortune. I went then to the Oxford Mail
for 3 years. You had a good time in the Oxford. You had a good time on the Oxford Mail, didn't you? What was your favourite story you covered whilst here, Ray?
I can't remember a favourite story so much, but I had a wonderful time in Oxford because I marched my present and still wife down St Giles to what was then the Oxford Registry Office, and she turned up on time and didn't reject me, and we're still together.
Very, very good. Now you've actually had a look at the Oxford Mail today, the website. What did you think?
You know what? I expected to be hugely underwhelmed. I have read and written about all the regional dailies having been scooped out of all their journalists and just people on the end of a phone and doing clickbait. I was actually pleasantly surprised to see, one, the Oxford Mail appears, as far as I can tell, to still have some reporters, and two, that they're still producing decent local news stories. So I was very, very reassured in a way, because I feared the worst.
So what did you say? Oh, Pete, what's your reaction to that, Pete?
No, well, first of all, hello.
Hello.
Secondly, I mean that's really good to hear, because I can understand the viewpoint that you mentioned at the start there, that you might have come or you might have seen elsewhere around the industry, but it's very very pleasing and rewarding to know that somebody from outside comes and has a look and can see that that we are still working very hard, and actually in these extremely trying times, and still coming up with and getting good stories every day. So I'm really pleased to hear that.
Ray, what was your favourite story?
You know what? I'm from the far and distant past. I used to have to try and get the last bus back to Oxford from covering Wheatley district parish bloody council. But so don't tell me about local stories in the winter. But you've got stories today about how Boswell's, the retail chain, is turning into a luxury hotel. You've got obviously the local weather, or how Oxfordshire MPs voted in plans to cut universal credit. That's just the sort of thing a local newspaper should be doing, I think.
Yeah, absolutely, and we have got a relatively small, hard-working team. If we look back, I'm sure 20 years.
I suspect over hard work team.
Well, they're a dedicated bunch who they know what's, and obviously we're talking through what people are doing every day anyway. But now more than ever, it's important for them to show that we are still there, and we are still reflecting what's happening on, and we are, it's not just easy wins. It's about proper stories, and I think you'd find that on the Mail every day.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously changed. I mean, when I was there was a sort of feeling that it was a slight adjunct of the Times. Lots of Oxford University stories. Maybe it was a bit too posh and too elitist in those days. Though I did have some early morning shouts going up, standing, trying to look unobtrusive at in the days of Red Robo and car strikes at Cowley. So they did cover stories like that and that in the past, but it's clearly changed. But maybe that's inevitable.
Now, Ray, Pete has 10 journalists. How big was the newsroom in your day?
I was trying to count, and because it was never an issue, I never counted. But I think it might have been closer to 20. And one I will always remember, an old hand who did all the police calls, and he had a collie dog called Sebastian that sat under his desk and went on the police calls. And 3 or 4 desks away from me was a feature writer who turned out to be Sir David Bell in the end, chairman of the Financial Times, and rather closer to home, the only member of your staff. Policemen and journalists get younger all the time. The only member of your staff, though I think he might be freelance now, I recognise is your former news editor, John Chipperfield. Now, of course, he's doing memory lane. Long may
Yes.
John Chipperfield and memory lane continue. Say aye.
Yes, well, his nostalgia supplement that he does on a Monday, it's very popular. We have 5 pages of pictures every Monday, and that's there's a big thirst and appetite for nostalgia both in the paper because we know, and it earns that space every week, but also we run all that online as well, and there's definitely an appetite for it there. But yeah, John's still behind that and will continue to be doing so.
He was local government reporter in my day, though I knew he went on to become news editor afterwards. Yeah, and I left the Oxford Mail to go to the Times parliamentary staff, and 2 remarks were made. The owner of Sebastian the Collie dog said, "Promoted to," and I completed his sentence, "to glory," and we had a laugh. And then I was called up to the late great news editor of the Oxford Mail, Ralph Brain, who looked at me and said, "What are you going to use for shorthand?" Because I was going to the Times parliamentary stuff. It was a very prescient remark. The same Ralph Brain once called me up and said that you've misspelled this person's first name. I said, "I'm very sorry." And he said, "If there's much more of that, you won't be here for very long."
But Ray, in your days, you were out on the streets all the time.
There was a lot of that. Well, I was really what was a general reporter. I mean, we just got told to get where to go, by the news desk. Oxford Magistrates Court was certainly one of my beats. I occasionally, was allowed to move up into one of the more senior courts. I was sent out to find stories from St Giles Fair, and one of the old hands said I'd come back with more stories than anybody ever had from St Giles Fair. So hey, maybe I had something behind me. I talked to people.
So
you could out and talk to people in those days. My worry about I'm partly reassured by what you've told me, but my worry about regional journalism today is that they're chained to a phone and a computer and never actually get out to talk to real people, which we were able to do in those days.
do you kick your journalists out of the office, Pete, to say, go and find real people, go and find real stories?
I mean, yeah, I have a long-standing about having real people at the heart of the story. So absolutely, I would always and often encourage reporters to get out and speak to real people and be out and about as much as possible. I mean, obviously at the moment that's not feasible, but I think under normal circumstances, we are trying to get out there, we are trying to speak to people, we are not spending every minute of every day sitting at our desks, and that's certainly true. Would be true were things to be more normal around. Yeah, but certainly has been. While I've been the editor in Swindon, part of it is being seen physically seen in the community that you're serving as much as anything else.
Of course, I noticed that you're not just editor of the Oxford Mail, you're also editor of the Oxford Times. I do hope you have a sense of history and literary history and know about your predecessors. When I was there was a certain editor called Anthony Price, who did wonderful spy novels and won the Golden Dagger Award for his spy novels and his intricate security novels. And then somebody, alas, both are late, but I became very friendly with another editor of the Oxford Times, who also won Golden Dagger Awards, James McClure from South Africa. And he went on, I believe, to be editor of the Oxford Mail as well. All these people were writing books in their spare time. Are you writing books in your spare time, sir?
If only I had any spare time. My time is spent. I
understand.
It's carefully split between doing this job and spending whatever time I can with my children as well. So it's a fine balance.
I'm only teasing, but I'm telling you that. I'm just telling you about the far distant past when there were all
it's fantastic.
Characters, almost editing the papers as their spare time activity.
Pete, did you just say 8 children? No.
No,
You didn't
thank goodness, not 8 children. Just 2's enough for me.
Okay. Now, Ray, as a media commentator, what advice would you have to Pete on NewsQuest and indeed how they operate?
No, I haven't got enough detailed knowledge about NewsQuest. I'm very struck by the fact that David Montgomery has returned to the battle, owning local and regional newspapers, and taking over the sort of, I nearly said the carcass, but let's say the remnants of what was Johnson Press. And I was very struck by what he said is he is going to decentralize. He is going to get people to do proper local stories, avoid clickbait. Now, there's no easy answer to the economic problems of the local press, but I suspect he might be right. And it seems like probably NewsQuest might have gone in for a bit of that centralization. After all, you, I believe, are editor of the Swindon papers as well as the Oxford papers. Isn't that a bit of a reach?
Well, I mean, I think
no pun intended.
No. Yeah, I mean, 2 points there. You know, I mean, I know JP inside out. I've worked for JP for a number of years, and they have a more centralized setup, or they had, but that may well have changed. But that's not something that with our local newsrooms with local teams working in the areas where they are. In terms of my remit, it's a large remit, but to make that work and to be successful around that, the point is that I can have a strategic overview for the titles and focus on the big picture, and then there's an excellent team of people at news desk level who keep the wheels turning.
But Sir Ray and Ray Snoddy will tell me. So the old Sir Ray, what's his name, who developed a whole empire of just purely local papers. They worked, didn't they? What's his surname, Ray, again?
Oh God, you caught me. You caught me.
Our short-term memories are both going.
He's well into his 80s, and he's still. But that's very, very hyper local.
Ray Tyndall.
Thank you very much. A younger brain comes to the rescue. I've met Ray Tyndall on several occasions. I've been down to his lair, and his office is in an old police station, and the police cell is lined with the police cell is lined with his copies. As far as I know, the Tyndall newspapers are still flourishing. I haven't looked into how they're doing in this present pandemic. I'm sure it must be more difficult for them too.
But Pete, is that a model that perhaps other people should follow? Just being hyper local,
Well, I mean, I think there is a lot of that level of news being provided by alternative providers. I think there's a network of Nub News which is around the country, and I think the place for all levels of news. And I think we have to look at what we think gives us the most, whether that's in terms of the quality of the story itself, whether that's for the paper and how it's going to be presented in there, or whether that's for digital and online. And so, we're not in a position to do everything. We have to make difficult decisions around the kind of level. And so, I think it maybe depends on where you are. I think it'd be quite difficult to do hyper local coverage in a city, whereas that maybe is easier in a maybe a more rural area, for example.
But in Bristol,
can I ask you, Pete, what you think of the apparent Montgomery hypothesis that legitimate local news stories, unique information you can't get anywhere else, is that the way forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is absolutely, and I mean that's borne out by the fact that, like you said when you looked at the Mail today, we are focusing on bringing the very best of local stories, and that'll be everything from the the biggest court story of the day to the, like you saw today, to the snow forecast for the weekend. There's everything in there, and we don't have clickbait. We don't engage in promising things that we can't deliver. So yeah, I think Montgomery's thoughts on what he's got for JP in future, in the new business. That's
national,
on, and
national world.
Yeah.
Ray. Now you're from Ulster, or some other people call it Northern Ireland, where local papers are thriving, as far as I can see, and they thrive by being totally local. Pictures of weddings, funerals, all of that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, my local newspaper is the Antrim Times, based in Lawn, and they just do. I mean, you could say investigative journalism. It isn't, but they just do a whole page of pictures of, before the pandemic, of people at social gatherings, and there's some of the worst football reporting I've ever seen in my life. Though the Purple Bricks owners from Larne, and Larne is now top of the Northern Ireland Premiership, so maybe things have improved. But yeah, ultra local. But there's still, for good or ill, a very strong sense of local community in those places in Northern Ireland, and the local newspapers thrive on that.
We're coming towards an end. Pete, do you detect that in Oxford and indeed in Swindon, the sense of community?
Well, I mean, while we don't have the same level as you were just describing there, for example, in the Swindon titles and the weeklies, and this, we are bringing some of those things that might have been cast as old-fashioned, like wedding reports and obits and things that might have, not always in recent years necessarily been top things for people to cover. We're trying to bring those back and give them a bit more coverage. So not to the degree maybe that you would get in a true hyperlocal, but certainly giving it back some space and some time. And I think that again, as I said earlier on, helps really drive the link between the title and the community, whether that's Oxford or whether that's Swindon or any of the other titles.
My worst memories, apart from the fear of missing the last bus back to Oxford from Wheatley Parish Council, was just occasionally being sent out, and this happened, to cover weddings and funerals, and you had to stand at the bloody gate, desperately trying to write the names down, knowing that for everyone you got wrong, you would be absolute toast. I don't wake up at night dreaming of those days, but I might.
There we are. Pete, anything you'd like to say? We've come to an end. Your hopes and fears coming out of this?
Yeah, no, I think it's been good to talk about where we are and what the successes are and what my hopes are for going forward. Really, it's about carrying on with that same idea, really, which is we are the voice of our communities. We need to represent our communities. We need to make sure there's always a link between us and our communities, but we also need to entertain, and we also need to hold power to account. So the articles that we're providing now and will continue to do so, will form that mix, which should continue to help us grow.
Okay, thank you both. Just going to add a commercial break now. Next week, Dr. Helen Salisbury, who from the Jericho Health Centre, who a couple of weekends ago I think did 1,000 vaccinations in a weekend. She's a local hero. A week after that, Professor Gary Browning, who is a professor of politics at Brooks, who'll be talking about Bob Dylan at 80. Who can believe that? And then in the middle of February, on February 17th, a very special Jericho film night. Ray will be very amused at this. This is the home of the liberal elite. So we're going to have films about Jericho, the 1950s home movies, and The Open Door from 1974, and then a film from last year about Our Jericho, Our Film. You can book for all of these on Eventbrite, or just go onto the website, myjericho.co.uk. But meanwhile,
John,
thank
you forget that when I lived in Oxford, I lived in Jericho. I'm an honorary resident.
No, you lived in Jericho, Ray, when it was poor.
Exactly.
Before people like me,
that's all my Oxford Mail salary would reach.
when it was poor, before people like me and Professor Panston arrived in Jericho.
Exactly,
Thank you. Right, thank you very much, and very much indeed. Let's go out on some nice images of Jericho.
Yoo-hoo!